Well, hey there, friend, and welcome back for another episode of the Your Hair Mentor podcast, where I'm your host and your hair mentor, Crystal Green. And I invite you to come take a listen to the top leaders and thinkers and experts and innovators in the beauty industry as they share their stories of triumph and struggles and success in creating their businesses behind the chair. I hope you enjoy these episodes just as much as I did recording them. See you on the inside, friend. Jodie, I am so excited to have you on the Your Hair Mentor podcast. I have seen your Instagram floating around and being tagged on so many different people's pages. I was like, who is this Jodie Brown person? Or rather, it's Jodie Brown, right?
Yeah.
So I'm excited to bring you in here today and kind of hear your story about how you went from a hairstylist to maybe an industry specific coach, and now you're not even necessarily involved in the beauty industry and what that looks like. But for my listeners who are not familiar with you, will you give me just a quick rundown of who you are and then where you're at, and we'll go from there?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for that lovely introduction. My name is Jodie Brown. I am a marketing agency owner, and I have been in the beauty industry my entire life. So my mom is a hairstylist. I was born in Sheffield in England, and I was literally in the salon when I was 2 weeks old. So I always joke that I teethed on perm rods, but truly that was the case. It was back in those salon days where my mom would put my little pram or whatever we had back in 88 when I was born, and her clients would dangle toys and all this kind of stuff. So I literally have been in the salon since almost birth. I finished hair school by the time I turned 18. I got behind the chair, and I was in this industry for I want to say it was 15 years when I officially stepped out of it. But there's so much of me that just identifies as a hairstylist, and I think probably always will, because I'm so close to this industry. My mom is still behind the chair as we speak. So that is kind of my backstory of how I got into the industry. And then really what started, I guess, the journey that I have been on since then is I had my son. And I had taken a couple years where I actually worked in sales. So I worked for distributors, and I was doing that. And then after I had my son, I just didn't want to be on the road anymore. My husband worked out of town. It just didn't really work for us. And so I originally thought I was going to, stay home with my little one. And then I was approached by someone I used to work with, and she's like, "Hey, I'm opening a salon. Would you be open to coming back behind the chair?" So he was 5 months old at the time. I tried to go back. I couldn't do it. It just didn't work in terms of childcare and all that kind of stuff. So I ended up taking an even more extended leave, and I went back into the salon, I guess, part time when he was 18 months old. And that lasted maybe a couple months, because then I got full-time demand. So the thing that I kind of left out is I went back into the salon, and it was brand new. So the area was literally still under construction. I hadn't done hair in the city that I was going back to behind the chair in for 5 years, because I'd moved around, been in sales. So I was starting over from scratch. On top of that, I now had a daycare bill to pay, right? Which is something I'd never had before. So I realized quickly that I needed to take control of my own marketing, and I needed to figure out a way to get clients in the chair. I came into the industry before social media was literally a thing. So it wasn't something I was familiar with. And what I did is there was a couple industry-ish podcasts at the time, but I really started looking outside of our industry. So I started listening to podcasts like the Gold Digger podcast, Being Boss, these bigger marketing shows. And that's kind of what introduced me to the world of online education. So I started taking a ton of marketing education. I started taking Instagram education. And really, I was able, with that knowledge, to build a clientele so quickly. I used Instagram. I learned about the power of developing a personal brand. I used a ton of trial and error, and I really was able to quickly build a specific clientele. I wanted to specialize in balayage. That was all the rage when I came back. That was what I wanted to do. And I built and I was able to go independent and really create a thriving business for myself in a short period of time. So that was kind of the first phase, I guess. And I'm really, believe it or not, I'm trying to keep this short.
I love it. Don't worry.
I'm failing, but I'm trying. And so fast forward a few years, and I would, we were going through some things in our personal life. Like, we were going through like an infertility struggle. So I was really at a low point. And this is almost like a cosmic moment that happened. I can't think of any other way to explain it, but there's an educator who I had taken her digital course because I really was struggling with boundaries. I think a lot of successful independent stylists can relate to this. The first struggle, of course, is like making the money, bringing in the clients, all this stuff. And then you get to a point where you're like, so much of your identity is tied to that you're like, okay, I was definitely full on in people pleaser mode. And I was getting a lot of my validation, especially because of what was going on in my personal life from being, the be all end all to my clients. Like that was where I was getting so much of like, it was really keeping me going, to be frank, but until it didn't. The burnout got really real. So I'd taken this educator's course because I really wanted to learn how to implement boundaries and, just take care of myself while still running a successful business. So I live in Canada, in the closest city to me is called Edmonton. And this educator was actually coming to the city that I worked in. And so she sent me a message on Instagram totally out of the blue and was like, hey, I'm hosting a class in your city and I would love if you came. Like, let me know if you're interested in coming to this class. And to give a little backstory on this, like a short backstory, I literally was at a stage where I was struggling so heavily with like my mental health that I wasn't even seeing like my friends, let alone going to like classes with random people. So initially, I really was like, I don't know, it was hard for me, but something in me was like, I need to say yes to this opportunity. I need to go ahead and do this. So I go to this class. It was brilliant. It was about like balayage and business and all this kind of stuff. It was great. And so during the Q&A section, one of the stylists that was also in attendance, and this was a room full of like established professionals.
Mhm.
Everyone was making good money. Everyone was like doing their thing. It was like a very established group of stylists. And this one person said, can you talk a little bit about Instagram? I'm really struggling with this thing or whatever. And just as the educator's like, I'm not a social media expert, but I almost feel like, those moments in your life where you feel like you were replaying it in your head in like slow motion.
Mm-hmm.
It was like every stylist in this room, except for me, was like almost like it was like a collective, like figurative throwing of hands where they're just like, I am so sick of social media. I'm overwhelmed by it. I don't know what I'm doing. It's not working. Like I'm not, all of these things about how they were struggling so heavily with social media. And I was sitting there being like, this is the one thing that I feel like I've got like on lock. You know what I mean? This has worked so well for me. I don't feel overwhelmed by it. I feel like it's been a wealth of opportunity. And that was the moment that I realized that I had something else to offer our industry. And up until then, I'd thought about, like I said, I'd been in online education myself. I thought about creating something, but I was telling myself stories like, well, there's already, like, for example, like there's already Jamie Dana. I've since interviewed Jamie on my show. A lot of students have been through both of our courses. We both teach the same thing very differently, all of these things. But that was something where I had a lot of imposter syndrome because I'm like, there's this amazing, incredible educator who already has this thing. And then I'm like, but why are all these people still struggling? Because everyone learns differently. Everyone learns from more than one person. And so I realized that there was still space for me. 2 weeks later, March 2020, the entire world shuts down. And I decided like then and there within a couple weeks of being off that I was like, you know what? I feel like I'm not going to go back behind the chair. I dissolved my, incredibly successful business. I let the person I was renting from know that I wasn't going to be coming back, paid out my notice, whatever. And I went full on into online education and teaching marketing and Instagram for our industry.
Holy cow. Ah,
It's a pretty
that
crazy
is
story.
so, it is. And so, okay, so I'm curious about this part because a lot of us hairstylists have a hard time with this. When you
Mhm,
walked away from
mhm.
your job as a hairstylist, were you having a bit of an identity crisis? Because I feel like I definitely had that.
You know, I think that's an interesting question. It's a really good question, actually. So I think it was kind of like a combination of all the things. Like, I feel like after being in the industry for 15 years, I'd built the business, I'd done all the things. I almost feel like I was ready. Like, I think something in me was ready for something new. And I definitely felt like it was a big decision. It was a hard decision, but I feel like I felt so strong in my purpose, and that was something I'd been missing. Like, to be totally transparent, the thought that went through my head during our infertility struggle, the thing that was so difficult for me is I legitimately thought everything good in my life has already happened. It's all downhill from here. That was the voice. So having this new thing that I felt like this purpose got me through. So I guess I wasn't thinking about that specifically because I was so like I just had so much purpose in this new thing. Like, I wanted to help hairstylists because I love my clients, but I love our industry and I love the people that work as hairstylists, as educators. Like, I just think we have some of the most incredible humans in the world. So I would say I probably had a couple of those thoughts, but the overwhelming purpose to do this new thing was stronger.
Yeah, I can kind of resonate with that myself. Back in earlier this year, I had kind of an aha moment that it was kind of the same feeling where I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can help hairstylists so much with this." It
Mhm,
almost like brought me to tears. I was like,
mhm.
"This is what we're missing. This is like that special sauce and that thing that I can bring to
Yes.
the table." And like as much as I love changing my clients' lives and
Mhm.
helping and impacting them and my communities, I was like, I can impact and help so many more people if I
Oh, I
invite
love that.
hairstylists into the story. So up until that point, I had a really hard time with being like, I'm not a hairstylist behind the chair anymore. But as soon as I
Right.
had that revelation, it was like a little easier to think, okay, I can
Yeah.
shift into this new person now, right?
Yes. And that's exactly what it is. It's a shift, right? It's an identity shift. And I think especially because like a lot of us, like, especially if you're listening to a podcast right now, you're a stylist, like you're investing your free time to further your career. Like, we're passionate about it, right? And so like whenever you think about like, who am I? I'm a hairstylist. Like, obviously we all have identities outside of that, but I think so many of us resonate so deeply. And so you're absolutely right. When you step out from behind the chair, there is a huge identity shift that you need to go through.
But I think it's helpful to go through that identity shift when you have a calling.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're totally right.
Oh man. Okay, so you switched to online marketing, social media
Mhm.
stuff. Did you immediately just focus on hairstylists? Because you don't just help hairstylists anymore, right?
Right. So basically what happened, it's kind of interesting. Like, it's kind of like a mixture of like purpose and then also something organic kind of happened in the background. So initially, yes, what I really felt strongly about was doing what I knew really well. Like, I and this is like something that I will die on this hill. Like, I'm not here to make people who are just like or help people who are just like trying to make a quick buck. Like, the people that I work with genuinely care. And that's something that like I hope that my clients will say about me is that like I care a lot about people and about what I'm doing. So when I first started educating, I was like, I'm going to teach what I know, like what I know, like the back of my hand. Right. So I went really in and really specific on Instagram marketing for hairstylists, building a brand. I worked with some stylists locally. I taught a class locally. So I went very niche. My first ever group coaching program that I launched was called Beauty Brand Bootcamp. I launched it through Instagram stories. A couple local stylists took it. and it's really cool, actually. I won't digress, but I'll tell you what happened from that first group later, maybe. But yeah, so I got really, really specific. And so what ended up happening during that time was I was putting like, I mean, I think in 2 years, I probably spent like $50,000 on education because I was like, I want to learn everything, right? Like I invested so heavily what I was making like back into my business. And so because of that, digital marketing was very different, right? So I learned not just about social media, but about email marketing, about, funnels, about all of these things. And I was able to launch my own programs. I was really, really, I feel like one of my superpowers in the beginning is I really am acutely aware of like the people that I'm helping, like what they're dealing with, what they're, how, and then also like what our aspirations are. Like we're visionaries, we're creatives, right? So I was able to create content that was so specific. And, that was really helpful. What happened is other educators, other coaches noticed that. So I was getting a lot of DMs and people approaching me saying like, hey, like, I see that you're doing this. Can you help me? And like I said, I'd walked away from my business behind the chair. So I was like, absolutely, like, I need to make this thing a go. So I started offering services as well. So I started offering like social media management or content creation, consulting for other educators, like really just truly sharing like what was working for me and what I know. And then that kind of evolved to the point where there was too much demand and I literally could not keep up. So that is when I branched out into creating my marketing agency while growing my online education at the same time. So that's kind of the story there. I hope I answered your question. I think I kind of
Yeah.
went off a little
No,
bit.
no, no. It's good. I like that. And so now in your marketing agency, is it just you running the show or do you have like employees? What does that look like?
So now we have a team of 4 directly in the agency. And then I have a couple other team members as well. So yeah, that's what that looks like now. But it's definitely shifted a lot of times, because I do like, we kind of have a hybrid approach where I am like the strategist, but I can't create all that content. Like I physically can't do it. And it's interesting. One of my first clients actually was like, I don't care who creates the content. You're never going to be able to keep up with all the strategy if you're the one doing everything. So that was the thing that I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. So that was kind of how that was birthed. And so I'm very much like, I'd say like creative director would be my role within the agency. And then I have an incredible team where they get trained on my process. And we like hire people who have experience, but then we absolutely train in the way that we do things. So that's kind of how it works on that side.
I think there's a lot of lessons in that whole spiel that you just gave that can be directly related back to hairstylists that are just working
100%.
behind the chair, right? It's like every time I hear you say something, I'm like, yep, that could be used. Oh, yep, that
Yeah.
too. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, what's the biggest takeaway here that we could give to hairstylists? Like, okay, let's say there's someone who's like behind the chair
Yeah.
and they've got a clientele that's like decent and they've got an income that's like decent, but they could really use to level up. What would be kind of like step one in their marketing journey, right? That could help them kind of take the next step.
Ooh, that's such a good question. I think the first thing, honestly, is like taking inventory. Because that was something where, like, as I've kind of progressed in my career, and there's like a whole other thing, like, one of the things that I noticed is it's definitely been a blend of like where I want to go and then the opportunities, and then being like, okay, like, I've really worked hard to create this opportunity. Do I want to take this or not? So, for example, behind the chair, say you keep getting a ton of requests for this service, but this service isn't like, maybe as like high, maybe it's not as profitable as some of your other services. You basically have two choices. Either you can change what you're attracting, or you can change to attract something different, or you can change the thing that you're attracting people for to make it work for you. So I think that's a really strong piece. When I did a lot of like one-on-one mentoring, you always get into like, not just brand building, but the nitty-gritty of the business. And I think sometimes for stylists, like one of the things that I noticed held a lot of stylists back is not knowing exactly what your pricing is, like not knowing like which services are profitable, which ones aren't. Am I just saying yes out of scarcity to a bunch of stuff that's not really even making me money? Like that, I think is really important, particularly when we're having the income conversation. For marketing, again, I'll die on this hill for any business owner. I think the absolute most important thing you need to focus on 100% of the time is your brand. Marketing channels will come and go. Marketing strategies and tactics will come and go. The one thing that will always be relevant is who are you? What is the value you provide? Who do you serve? What do you help them with? All of these foundational things. What are your values? Like, even in Facebook groups all the time, I'm seeing people say things like, I had to cancel this service because their values no longer align with mine. That is something as a brand, as a beauty business owner, like think about these things and then show it. That is huge when it comes to marketing.
Yeah. And then, yeah, like stick with it too. Like, don't say
Yes.
that something is a value of yours and then like push it to the wayside.
No, and I think that's like when it comes to values, my biggest advice always, and this is like, I don't have this program anymore, but one of the things I always used to say inside a Beauty Biz Brand Academy is like, your values are much more like you have to show, not tell.
Mm.
So for example, if sustainability is something like environmental sustainability is something that you're very passionate about, like versus saying, instead of saying I'm passionate about environmental sustainability, show like I'm a green circle salon, we recycle 99% of the things that you come in and do, like, this is why we chose this brand because they reflect this value. So instead of just like, everyone can say they value something, but how are you embodying that? And maybe we can show that versus telling it. And believe it or not, I think that's huge when it comes to income. Honestly, like if you get really clear on your brand, everything becomes easier.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I wonder your thoughts on this too. So I think there's definitely power in like looking internally and figuring out what's important to you, especially as a
Yeah.
service provider. How do you want to show up? Who do you want to show up as?
Yeah.
But I think there's also a little bit of like being aware of where the market is heading and what your consumers are demanding, because
Yeah.
sometimes you think you're going to come to the table in one way, but then you
Yeah.
realize there's a huge demand for another way that you could shift towards and find
Yeah.
like incredible increases in your income or clientele or whatever. What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
That's such a good question. I think this gets confused a lot, right? Because I've said it and I continue to say is like, be authentic. And what I mean by that is that like you like pretending to be someone else is a recipe for disaster, right? Because people are actually going to meet you. However, authenticity does not require a complete absence of strategy. When I say be authentic, I don't mean show up on Instagram and trauma dump everything that's happened to you that's bad. That's
Oh,
not
thank you.
that's not what I mean by authenticity, but it's more about how you show up and your voice and all these things. Your marketing and your positioning and what you bring to market absolutely, I think, has to be based on that. Like, for example, during the balayage trend, I don't know that anyone could have like really made it as, like doing the kind of highlights that have actually kind of started to make a comeback. But like, like the 90s, like I had them like the red blonde stripe thing going on. When the market is demanding like the balayage and the blended and the blondes and all that stuff, like it might be, maybe you'll find a little niche, maybe you will, but like half of stylists couldn't go that route. You know what I mean? Like they would have to, unless it's a very specific niche, at some point you do have to look at like, what do my clients want? So I think it's always needs to be a consideration. And that's part of building your brand too. It's not just about you. It's also about the person that you're wanting to attract and work with. Because we're all in the industry, right? Like even now what I do, if I'm creating stuff that nobody wants,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not going to have a very successful business, no matter how authentic I show up?
Yeah, yeah. And I think this also hits on something else that I think of a lot that I think hairstylists get wrong. They think that they can come in and create their brand, and to them, that means make a cute salon space and have a cute aesthetic on Instagram. And then they come in with like a set of boundaries and policies and values, and then it's like a done deal that they don't have to think about again. There needs to be this like ever shifting like awareness of your
Yeah.
brand, and like because markets change, because demand changes, because
Yeah.
styles change, you always have to be acutely aware of what's going on in the
Yeah.
world and then shifting, right?
Well, absolutely. Like, for example, think about think about me. Like, if I came in and I refused to talk about reels when reels came out, you know what I mean? Like, that would be like, it's like a whole bunch of people. It's like if you're refusing to talk about something that's a huge conversation in your industry, I think you almost lose credibility there. And like with the branding too, like I think one of the biggest pieces is experience. So it's not just about the aesthetic, it's about the experience and like how you make people feel. And so that is something too, where like sometimes I'll have people be like, I don't really want to like niche, like drop all these services or whatever. And I don't think you always have to. I think it's easier to market to a niche, absolutely. But I think that the experience niche is something that is under marketed to and underutilized, because that's something where styles change for sure. But like if I knew, like for if I had someone in my area who I could go and get like a spa style hair treatment, I wouldn't care. Like I would pay extra for that. I would do all the things. Like those are the kind of things you need to think about, is like what does your client value in their experience, your ideal client as well, because that's a huge part of your brand.
I love that you bring that up, because that is actually like something I specialize in, is helping people hone in on their client experience. And
Love that.
yeah, like for you the client experience is digitally, right? Like
Mhm, mhm.
how are they going to experience your brand and experience what you have to offer online?
Yeah.
And you do that through all these digital marketing channels.
Yeah.
And for me, speaking to a hairstylist, it's how are your clients in your chair going to experience what you're offering?
Yes.
It's a very different thing, but like
Yeah.
kind of the same at the same time, right?
Yes, and it has to be consistent. Like
Yes.
that's the thing, right? Like you can put all this time and energy into creating a beautiful online aesthetic and like all of that. And listen, I think it's important. That was something that was important to me as a hairstylist. But the end goal is they're going to come to your salon. They're going to meet you. They're going to get the service. And at no point, like I think I always used to call it like an moment. Like, you know what I mean? Like from finding you on social media to going to your website to booking an appointment to coming into the salon, I feel like if you can create, if you're building all that trust and then they come in and it's not what they were expecting, you're never going to see that person again. Right. And you can, I mean, I'm in marketing. I know the importance of attracting new people, but you could attract new people all day long and you're still going to struggle to make it if you're not retaining.
Right. Would that be considered catfishing? Like if you like build this whole brand up, right? And then your client comes in and it's like totally not the same, would you
Yeah.
have to like wah wah? I'm pretty sure that's
I
catfishing.
I would feel super catfish. And actually, my friend Hunter has actually said that. And I was like, it was like, don't catfish your clients. And I'm like, absolutely. Like, that's such a good way of putting it. You're 100% right.
I never thought of it like that, but it's totally like that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh man.
totally.
You know what's funny is in some of this content that I've put together recently, I'm doing this because I had this realization when it comes to digital marketing. We
Mhm.
talk about like, you know, people being leads, like you have warm leads and cold leads, and then you have
Yeah,
like your nurture sequences when you get someone into your space. And there's all of this like protocols of like how
yeah,
to handle, how to present yourself. And in the salon, that really doesn't exist for us. There's not a
right,
lot of people coaching to that. And so
right.
what I'm trying to put together for stylists, I love that we're talking about this, is like a welcome sequence for a new client,
Yes.
right? Like not just digitally, that's important too, but like literally in your chair, like the words that are coming out of your
Oh,
mouth,
I love
the
that.
actions of your body, the
Mhm.
emotions that you're helping them feel, and then how are you going to nurture them through the
Yeah,
journey of being your client, right?
I
First
love
visit,
that.
second visit, all the way on through, there should be like things that you're hitting along the way with every
Yeah.
client to make sure that it's like brand specific for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think you're right. It's like that in-person experience is vital. I feel like too, over the last like few years, everything's cyclical, right? Everything has been so digital, obviously, like we know why, but like I think that bringing back and paying extra attention to that in-person those in-person touches, like that is going to really help you build something sustainable and grow something sustainable. So we're
Right.
all like I think that's the thing for hair too, is like, I don't know about where you live, but I can go to the grocery store, buy all my stuff, check out, go home, get gas without literally talking to a single other human being. Like everything is digitalized now. You don't even have to check out with a human at the grocery store anymore, right? Hair is one of those really personal industries still, right? We have that human connection all the time, all throughout it. Like, you get all of these, you hear first about pregnancies and like, graduations, and you get to celebrate and be there for all of this stuff. And the relationship piece is so, so vital. And I think that that's something we need to be really aware of when we're thinking about businesses. And that doesn't mean like tolerate getting treated like crap or lower your boundaries or anything. It just means like put the value in the relationship because it is there. That's something I brought to like even the digital marketing space that I think sometimes we don't think about the transferable skills too. For anyone who's even thought about, side hustling maybe or like stepping out or whatever, like there's so many skills that you learn as a hairstylist just by working in this industry that are so transferable and applicable to different things in life too.
Absolutely. I feel like more than probably any other industry that I know of, hairstylists tend to grow a huge sense of like emotional intelligence.
Totally.
And that stretches like way far beyond just being a hairstylist, too.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. Like the relationships in your personal life, like all of those things. I think that, I don't know, like I said before, I love hairstylists. I think that there's something really special about the industry that we're in. And you see, even like I haven't done hair for like 3.5 years, and I'm like, like, I don't think you ever really let go of that identity when you've worked in the hair industry.
Totally. And I think it probably helped shift you and shape you into being able to do marketing the way you are because you had those experiences with clients and you got to understand how you can really impact someone
Yeah.
with a good experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's like, I mean, even like, I think the in-person thing, even in the digital space, like we started hosting retreats at the end of, or this year, this fall, because I think that in-person experience, like I want to bring that into our digital marketing thing as well. And, the relationships, like that's what when I built a marketing agency, I was like, I am not building one of these like super, like I use automation, don't get me wrong, but I'm not building one of these like super slick like bro like marketing things. We are literally called Align Creative Co, because like that creativity is the utmost importance to me, and the experience in the relationship.
Mm, love it. Okay, so I know a few people personally that work with you. There's, I guess they both speak to beauty industry
Yeah.
folks mostly.
Mhm.
Who is the majority of your clients that you work with nowadays?
So the majority of people that I work with nowadays are like, either creatives or hairstylists who have started serving their industries in a different way. So that would be that coaching, be that online courses, speaking, like some of our clients are like authors, that kind of stuff. So that is who I predominantly work with, as well as like people. So I'd say the catch-all word for the people that I really serve is visionary entrepreneurs.
Ooh, I like that.
That is like how I resonate with that. My clients really like that is how I see them. They're here to make a difference. They're here to make an impact on like a huge scale. And so for me, that was how I was like, okay, this is how that like evolution, right? Now I can impact the hair industry and some of the stuff like like I still have things that are like really helpful for hairstylists. Like, if you want to learn how to use many chats or you want to do this, but particularly if you're ready to impact the industry outside of behind the chair kind of thing, that is where I have found my calling and like my real joy. Because I was doing both for a long time. And I think at a certain point, I've always said you can't be a master at everything. And I kind of chose where I'm going all in. And so I choose to impact our industry by impacting the people who are impacting our industry.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Have you
So
found that there is kind of a certain breakover point where a hairstylist gets to where they're like, okay, now I'm ready to take the next step? Like for you, you were 15 years in, and then the
yeah,
pandemic was like the catalyst, right?
yeah, for
But
sure.
have you seen kind of a like, yeah, is it like 5 years in, 10 years in, 15 that you see more people wanting to come to you to say, like, okay, I'm ready to do something different?
Actually, no, which is interesting. And not everyone wants to leave behind the chair either. That's like
Right.
another thing. So I think that like I have people who are like for my agency clients, like right this minute, we have clients who are like 25, 27. We have clients who are in their 50s. So like it really does it really depends. Like I think maybe the common thing is they're ready for more. They're called for more. Not that, and when I say more, I want to be extremely clear that I do not believe that there is anything wrong with staying behind the chair for the rest of your life. I don't mean more as in better. I mean more as in different. So like I know a lot of people, like I said, my mom is just turned 60 and she is still behind the chair. Loves doing hair. I respect her and her business just as much as any other person I've ever met. So like I think that, it's people who are called to have a role where they're impacting the industry in a different way. That
I
would
think
be the
that's
best way I can say it. Yeah.
That's a really good way to put it. And I feel like I resonate with that. Like, I've always been the kind of person that, like, I can't stop thinking about the next thing, right?
Yeah,
And
for
it
sure.
used to be like with my clients, I'd be like thinking 4 appointments ahead for them. And I'm like,
Mhm.
already, I got the next year planned out with their hair
Yeah.
colors. And I'm like, and then we can do this and we can do that. And then I can bring this in and do that. And like, I always thought
Mhm.
about trying to like increase different things in the salon and like events we could do. I couldn't turn it off.
Totally.
I was just constantly like ping ponging all over the place with ideas.
So you're a
And
visionary.
yeah, like it's like built into me. So I think that's a
Yeah.
really different thing to bring up here is like some people, like most of my coworkers, my entire life that I've worked with are like very happy hairdressers.
Mhm.
And they love that like they clock out, right? I'm air
Right.
quoting here. They clock out and like they're done for the day. They don't go
Yeah.
home thinking about it. I'm like dreaming about stuff and like up at
Same.
night making notes, keeping journals of like what am I going to do with my life? Like there's
Yeah.
more. This like, big MORE in the sky kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I love hearing that you agree with that.
Oh my goodness, yes. And like I think that a lot of people too, like I haven't actually asked any of my clients, but if I were to poll them, I would venture that a lot of them have probably at least had ideas for different businesses before. Like I remember like I was like I'm going to have a candle company and then I had like all these different ideas. The other thing too that I'll mention is that sometimes it's a lifestyle thing. So for me, that is a part of it as well. Like it was definitely the calling, but also like location freedom. Like my family lives 12-hour drive away. I like to travel. I like seeing the world. I was born in England. I live in Canada. Like I've never felt, I don't know how to say this. Like I've never felt at home being just at home.
Mm,
Like I feel like I need to like my husband calls it like the itch that I get because I'm like I need to like go. I need to see the ocean. I need to do these things. So that was a part of it too, is I was very drawn to a type of career that included travel. And I think for some of my clients and some of the educators I talk to, part of it can be a lifestyle thing as well.
for sure. Yeah, they say, oh, what was it? Some podcast I listened to a while ago that was
Mhm.
talking about the different ways that you can find freedom as an
Yes.
entrepreneur. And it was like
Yeah.
time freedom,
Yeah.
financial freedom, which we find both of those things behind the chair, right? You can make really good
100%.
money, have a great schedule, but the other one was
Yeah.
location freedom. And that's one
Mhm.
thing as a hairdresser behind the chair, you are tethered to your
Right.
chair, right? Which
Yes.
for some people is great. They're rooted, they're
Yeah.
happy, they have their cool communities and their lives, and then there's others of us that are like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be tied.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And like I think the thing that's really beautiful about like the era that we're in now is like all of these things are good. None of these things are bad or wrong. Like it doesn't mean like, someone wanting to pursue something out beyond, the chair, it doesn't mean anything about like loving industry or the career that we're in or any of those things, right? I think sometimes we get in our heads, and I think this has been indoctrinated in us just forever, that endings have to be bad, like that it has to mean that something was bad or wrong. And when I shut down like Beauty Biz Brand Academy, I had a lot of guilt because I was like I loved it still. Like, so it wasn't that I didn't want to have, like, it wasn't that it was bad or that it wasn't working or that I, didn't like it anymore. It was that I just wanted to go in a different direction. And I was just like, you know what? Sometimes a door has to close for another door to open, and that can be okay.
Do you know what your Enneagram number is?
Oh my goodness. I just did this because my friend Casey Taylor loves the Enneagram. I don't know if you connect with her. She's incredible.
No.
Um, and I just did this and I cannot for the life of me remember what it was. I want to say, was it a 3 or a 7 maybe? I
I
don't
was gonna
know.
guess 7. That's what I am too. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I wonder if a lot of us, I forget the name of the 7. It might be like the dreamer or something. I should know this. I
Yeah.
interviewed this girl who's like an Enneagram specialist, and it was
I
such a
love
fun
that.
conversation. But there's a lot of similarities with like the entrepreneurial fire that a lot of us have and that
Yes.
personality.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I love that. And you're right. It's like you just can't turn it off. And I've been
Mm-mm.
this way since I can't even remember. Like I remember like putting together girl bands and, looking for managers and stuff like that when I was like 7. So I feel like some of us just have that drive, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Sometimes I wish I
No.
was someone who would just be like, I remember thinking like, what is wrong with me? Why do I care so much? Like I'd be in a good salon, I'd be making great money, and I'd be like not satisfied. And I remember wishing that I just was.
Yeah.
But now I realize it's just who I am, and you can just follow it.
Right, right. Okay, so I'm curious when you have someone come into your space,
Mhm.
what is one of the biggest like mental roadblocks that they have to get through first in order to kind of start their like marketing journey? Because I think this could really help hairstylists out.
I think a fear of being seen
Mm,
and a fear of being judged.
bingo.
Um, And the interesting thing is it's never the judgment of the people that you're actually marketing to that you're worried about. It's always like, and I dealt with it like, because I started relatively like, now I think it's just kind of a given. Like we're on Instagram, we show up, like whatever. When I kind of started that, like I remember all of my coworkers had Instagram accounts, but I remember talking about things and someone being like, well, I mean, Instagram's not going to be around for very long. Like, it's not like it's a career or whatever. And like, isn't it like, I can't remember what the comment was, but it was something about like, I just remember feeling like, should I feel ashamed of like what I'm doing? You know what I mean? Like, I'm able to like, I can't grasp the comment, but it was basically like, this is a waste of time essentially, or like, really like, self-indulgent, whatever. And at that point, I had already built a really successful business using Instagram. I was already able to fill cancellations within like 24 hours by throwing up an Instagram story. You know what like it was working, and it still made me feel that way. So if you're getting started and you're, internalizing these things or you're hearing these things or whatever, it can definitely become difficult to get off the ground. So I think that mindset piece is probably the biggest thing. I don't know if you're like a personal development book, like obsessed person like I am, but the book that changed my life was You're a Badass by Jen Sincero.
Mm.
And that really, there's a part in that book where she's like, this was like a different time. She's like, I was like, my marketing team made me like stand in a blazer and like take all these cheesy pictures. And I was absolutely friggin' mortified, but I did it anyway. And it was like, and now it's different. You could be more yourself. So it's great. But it's like part of it is just being scared and just doing it anyway. And like, if people are going to judge you, they're going to judge you whether or not you show up and market yourself. So like the idea of no one judging you ever, like that's just, I would just release that right now because it's the only way to do that is to never do, say, or be anything ever.
Yeah. And like, to be completely honest, like judgment is a natural human thing we do. Like
Yeah,
it's like,
100%.
and it doesn't need to be a bad thing either. Like
Yeah.
it's just someone's judgment shouldn't affect you and how you feel about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's just taking that weight off and just like getting out of your own way is typically a lot of it. And then also too, this like a little bit of tough love, but like sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do.
So true.
Like period. Like, I don't want to do my bookkeeping. Like it's more fun now for sure. Now that I have like a fun bookkeeper, but like, I don't wake up in the morning jumping out of bed at the idea of going through my bank statements. Like that's not something I love, but I have to because if I don't, my business will fail. So when it comes to marketing, it's one of those things where, if you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to marketing will change over the next 10 years. Maybe Instagram won't be a thing. Maybe the things will change the way that we do them, but you're always going to have to market your business. And if you don't,
Mm-hmm.
you won't have one.
Yeah,
Like
it's
that's
so
just the
true.
way it is.
And I think that's whether you're showing up digitally with your marketing
Yeah,
or in person. Like I was coaching a
100%.
stylist recently who was having a hard time getting clients in her chair, right? And
Mhm.
I don't focus on digital marketing as any of my coaching because that
Right.
is not my zone of genius, right? Like
Fair.
I
Yeah.
barely figure it out myself. But in-person marketing, that is my jam. And so I
Yeah.
gave her some things that have worked for me over the past, like, you just have to get over the fact that you
Yeah.
might be embarrassed. But like I would
100%.
find a way to insert the fact that I'm a hairstylist into every conversation that I would have with every
Love that.
rando in
Yeah.
town. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like some lady in the candle store, and I'd say something like, "Oh my gosh, this smells like this hairspray I use." I mean, that's a stupid
Yeah.
example, but like,
No, but yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
and she might look at me like, okay, ding dong hairstylist, like whatever. But at least I put myself out there. And more
Yeah.
often than not, the response was, "Oh, you're a hairdresser? Well,
Yeah.
tell me about this," right? And so it would open
Hmm.
a conversation, but I had to be able to put myself out there and be judged.
Yes. And that's the thing. Like, it doesn't matter where you're showing up, really. Like, and it's same thing for online as in person, right? Like, and especially now because like there is so much more. I feel like it's very similar actually to the way that people feel when they are putting themselves out there. Like, for me, the idea of going and handing out a business card, I would way rather make a video on Instagram. Some people feel the opposite,
I'm the
right? So,
opposite.
like, yeah, exactly. So, it's like just finding what works for you and then starting the journey that way. Like, it's not that you have to do everything exactly how one person says. It's just that you need to find a way to do it because you have to put yourself out there. Nobody can book a service with someone they don't know exists. It's
Yeah,
impossible. So
truly.
you have to find a way to get in front of, and that's all marketing is, really. It's like, my favorite quote is, marketing is like asking someone on a date. Branding is the reason that they say yes. It's
Ooh.
not good. I love that one. That's Ren Jones, and that applies online and offline. So whether or not you're doing it on the internet or in person, you have to extend the invitation. And part of that is them just knowing that you exist.
Absolutely. So I'm wondering, I guess this goes back to when you used to coach more hairstylists.
Yeah.
Would you ever touch on any of the in-person marketing? Because I feel like they need to kind of go hand in hand, right? Like,
Yeah.
what if you have this like amazing online presence and your
Yeah.
marketing is like beautiful, and then you go to the
Mhm.
bank and there's like a perfect opportunity to have
Yeah.
a conversation with this person that's your ideal client by looking at them,
Yeah.
but you don't say anything and they don't have social media, so they don't know you
Right.
exist.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So I don't coach to in-person marketing because honestly, that was like my nightmare as a stylist, like when I was behind the chair. But I do talk about experience. So like the in-person experience between the two. But I agree with you. I think that's the thing, right? And once you get comfortable, like now, I would be fine talking in person because I built that confidence, right? So it's like any muscle. It's just figuring out the way to like activate that part of yourself so that you're able to show up and promote your business. And I think that like by focusing, like I said, I focus on the experience in the salon because I think that's a huge part of it. You cannot have a beautiful online presence and then have like a subpar business like in the chair. Like that just will not work. But I think you're right. I do think all of it goes hand in hand. And once you develop that confidence in your experience and that confidence in your like online presence and offline presence, it all does work together. It's all part of your brand and what you provide.
Awesome. Well, as we wrap this up, Jodie, I would love to hear. I'm like trying to think maybe a first step that a stylist could take if they're like
Yeah.
struggling with their marketing and they want to kind of improve how they show up online, because we'll stick with your
Yeah.
zone of genius here.
Yeah.
What is a first step they should do to do that?
So honestly, whenever people come to me and they're like, I'm not getting any clients, all this stuff, the first thing I look at is like the amount that they're showing up. And like if it's like and I don't coach to you have to post every day at all. But if you're posting like once every 6 months and you're not attracting clients on social media, that's why. Just like to simplify everything. And so if you are showing up and you're not getting the results that you want, I think it does come down to your branding. I think step one is getting clear on your brand, because like the thing that people do instead of that is they'll just post hair photo after hair photo after hair photo. People need to be able to see, and this is like not just on Instagram, but also like on your website, wherever else you show up, like who you are, who you serve, the space, the experience, and your work, not just your work. That's kind of a really important piece there.
Okay, I love that. And then just to clarify, because I feel like so many people get stuck on their brand being the aesthetic,
Yeah.
right? What we're talking about is literally why would someone come to you?
Yeah. So Jeff Bezos actually has a really great quote, and it's brand for a business is like reputation for a person. So when you think about your brand, and when I refer to your brand, the visuals are part of it. Like I always used to go values, voice, and visuals. That was like the 3 V's of personal branding. And that's kind of where you're leading with. But if you're focusing on showcasing those, like I'm kind of breaking it down for someone who maybe hasn't done the personal branding process, if you can kind of showcase those 5 things that we just talked about, that is going to like pull your personal brand out of you in a way. And I do think, and this might be an unpopular opinion because I think that, but I think that more not curated, but I think more put together feeds are going to make a comeback, because I think that like visual, and I mean like, consistency. I don't mean perfection. I mean recognizable content. Because honestly, I think it's a subconscious thing in the beauty industry that like they care about their business. They care about the way they represent their business. That means they're going to care about me and the way that I'm taken care of. So I
Mm.
do think there is that piece as well. It's not that I'm hating on visual branding. It's just that I think that the deeper branding work needs to come first, because otherwise, how are they going to make sense? Like if your values and your vibe and everything is like, you're creating an escape, it's like relaxing and it's chill and it's calm, and like you want to attract people who really want to come in and be calm and have that experience. And then you're showing up online with you know, like neons and like metal music in all your videos, like it's probably not going to make any sense. So that's
Yeah.
why I think that part needs to come first.
It's funny that you bring that up because I tend to follow a lot of industry leaders and coaches
Right.
and experts because I like having these kind of conversations, right? And
Yeah.
so I will like size up
Yeah.
someone's presence
Yeah.
subconsciously, I think. But now that
Yeah.
you said it, I'm like, this is a thing in like 2 seconds. Like I'll
Yeah.
see a post or a story or something, and then I go and I click on their feed. And if it
Yeah.
has this like very nice aesthetic. Like it doesn't need to be
Yeah.
anything specific, but it's all there's continuity. I'm
Yeah.
immediately like, oh, this person knows what they're doing.
Trust. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Trust and consistency go hand in hand, I think. And that's what it is, right? It's like you can be sure. My business coach actually says this all the time. She's like, if someone's like very reactive and they're showing up and you can tell whether they're in a mood, and it's like they'll post once and then ghost you for 6 months and like all this stuff, like that doesn't feel like what does she call it? Like a safe investment. And I kind of feel that same way. Like, I think that the way that we show up online doesn't have to be perfect. Some people are like really funny and they like something more like offbeat and quirky. Some people are just like, I'm just going to like have, like image only, like all of that stuff. So like you said, it's not about being specific. It's about like, can you tell, or does this person just seem kind of like all over the place? And I'm not looking to hire people who are all over the place.
Right. And I would think that most clients aren't looking to pay hairstylists that are all
Yes,
over the place too, right?
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because of the rise of like, I know a lot of people are talking about the luxury services, and I'm all for luxury services. I'm all for building a luxury brand, but you need to present yourself in a way that says luxury, and you need to provide the experience to back it up, because luxury is not a high price tag. It's a whole vibe and experience. So I think that's super important if you're someone who's like, in one of those arenas that are typically more luxury.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I know before we started recording, you mentioned that you're in kind of a transition, like you got rid of a bunch of education that
Yes.
you used to
Yeah.
have, and then you're like starting some new stuff. So if one of my listeners is like, I need more Jodie Brown in my life, what is going to be available for them, and how can they get a hold of you?
Well, if you're a hairstylist, the first place that I'll direct you to is my podcast, Hairstylist Rising. So it is a huge resource for stylists when it comes to education on branding, on marketing, and then other interviews with like other industry leaders. So that's something that's really great. And then just come send me a DM on Instagram. I'll let you know what I'm up to. I'm always talking about, different things. We do have like a lot of the things that I'm doing now are still very applicable. Like I said, when I first started my marketing education behind the chair, I wasn't just listening to hair podcasts. I wasn't just learning from hairstylists. I was learning from everyone. So if you want to peek into my world and kind of what I'm doing and how I can help you, just send me a DM, let me know.
Mm, love that.
Yeah.
Oh, Jodie, this has been such a pleasure. It was really nice to have you on here today, and I'm sure anyone that's listening has definitely gotten some value out of this.
I knew that we would click because I've heard such great things about you from like some of our mutual like connections. So thank you for having me on. This has been really great. And I loved your insight too. I'm always excited to learn from other people. And I think we have something to learn from everyone, regardless of what industry we're in. So thank you for having me. And this has been great.
Oh, yay. Awesome. Well, we will definitely be in touch because I feel like you're going to be someone I'm going to follow here.
Same.
Thanks, Jodie. Bye bye.
Thank you.
All right, friend. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of the Your Hair Mentor podcast. It has been my pleasure to be here as your host. Again, my name is Crystal Green. And until next time, my friend, as I always love to say, have a wonderful hair day, and I'll see you then. Okay, bye.